What's up, guys? I'm Christian. Welcome to Fed by Fire. I got out of work tonight and we had a short one, so I wanted to give y'all just a little something to hold y'all over. First, I want to talk about a California woman who worked as a longtime signature collector for ballot incentives who has been charged with paying individuals, including homeless people living in the Skid Row area of downtown Los Angeles, to register to vote. And Cam Higby has been, his videos have, been reported extensively on this. Shout out to him. But, these were basically false registrations, meant to undermine Americans' faith in elections, to put it vaguely. Even more so for payoffs, when payoffs are involved, said, the Assistant Attorney General, Harmeet K. Dillon, of the Justice Department Civil Rights Division. They said this Justice Department is committed to ensuring that all U.S. elections are fair and free from illegal meddling so that all Americans can accept their results with confidence. Brenda Lee Brown Armstrong of Marina Del Rey, California. This woman is at the ripe old age of 64. She's also known as Anika, is charged with one felony count of paying another person to register to vote, a federal charge that carries, a statutory maximum penalty of 5 years in federal prison. Armstrong has agreed to plead guilty to the charge and is scheduled to make her initial appearance this morning in the U.S. District of Santa Ana. She is expected, to plead guilty in the coming weeks. According to her plea agreement, for approximately 20 years, Armstrong periodically worked as a petition circulator, she called it. In that role, she was paid by individuals and entities known as coordinators to collect voter signatures on official petitions that qualify for incentives and referendums and recalls for California state ballots. Armstrong drove around the Los Angeles area to find registered voters to sign petitions. After gathering enough signatures, Armstrong returned the petitions to her coordinators, who then paid her a set amount for each registered voter's signature. The amount she was paid varied depending, on the specific ballot initiative. Because, her coordinators only paid for signatures attributed to registered voters, Armstrong, endeavored to ensure the people who signed her petitions were registered voters. That, you had to have that to sign one of her things and, get her $5 or get her cigarettes so, they can continue to pass whatever laws they want, and I give it to them. They have a blueprint for this shit, California is its own world. I've never been there, but, from the outside looking in, it looks like the Purge with a cross between Zombieland. They just have a real problem in all sorts of ways, and a lot of systems are rigged, especially this system where they're paying voters with things like cigarettes, and $3 and $5 to sign petitions. It's just, it's something that their state needs to start putting an eye on. But Armstrong occasionally solicited signatures on Skid Row, an area we've talked about extensively on this channel in downtown Los Angeles, notorious for its homelessness. And, Skid Row was a convenient place to collect signatures because of its high coordination of people in relatively small areas who were willing to sign petitions in exchange for payment. Armstrong regularly paid and offered to pay individuals cash, usually in amounts, and this is it, y'all, between $2 and $3, to induce them to sign her petitions. Many of Skid Row's homeless population were not registered to vote, though. To ensure that she maximized her pay from her coordinators, starting no later than 2025, Armstrong began offering payment to individuals not only to sign her petitions, but to also complete the voter registration form. Before going to Skid Row, Armstrong gathered a stack of voter registration forms from the Los Angeles County Register to Vote office. Some homeless people did not have an address to put on their form. On several occasions, Armstrong provided a homeless individual with her own former address in Los Angeles so that they had something to write on their registration form. These registration forms simultaneously registered an individual to vote in California elections as well as in federal elections. Because California automatically sends a vote by mail ballot to every registered voter, this also meant, ballots in some homeless individuals' names could have the potential to be sent to, Armstrong's former residence where the homeless individual did not live or collect mail. So that came back to bite her, though. But on January 30th, as a part of her ongoing scheme, Armstrong knowingly and willingly paid another person to register to vote. She paid the person for the purpose of causing that person to register to vote in federal elections as well. In this case, is ongoing. We will be keeping up with it, California had to do something because they have journalists out here exposing everything that's going on. So good for them. They made one arrest. If you live in the California area and you see this going on, tell me some stories in the comments. I want to hear them. Next, we're going to Atlanta. We're going to talk about Miss Kristen Draper. She has been arraigned on federal charges of money laundering conspiracy for allegedly conspiring with her boyfriend, Antoine Brown, to funnel proceeds of Brown's, the F word, fentanyl dealing through a Dayton, Ohio group home for at-risk youth. Brown, a felon with state and federal convictions for trafficking, rock, blow, and H, is facing federal drug charges related to the seizure of a massive amount of fentanyl in Sandy Springs, Georgia last year. Money laundering enables criminal organizations to profit and operate in the shadows, said J.W. Chang, special agent in charge of DEA Atlanta Field Division. Though coordinated investigative efforts and, strong partnerships with law enforcement, remains committed to following the money, uncovering criminal networks, and ensuring that those responsible are brought to justice. Draper was, entrusted with protecting at-risk children and instead, allegedly used her position to launder money from drug sales, drugs that are killing young people every day as we speak. They're going to continue to hit these boys aggressively. If you're out there in the streets messing with this stuff, they're coming for you. I've seen it. I'm a how can you say? That's a piece of my story was and my life changed, when that fentanyl got introduced into my life, as it does many people. But as well as money launderers who facilitate, crime by concealing the proceeds, this is a common theme we talked about in this channel. The investigation revealed, though, that Draper used the commingling funds to purchase a $3 million home in Forsyth County, Georgia, and a Lamborghini SUV worth over $200,000. On March 21st, 2025, Brown was arrested driving that same Lamborghini SUV with nearly 10 pounds of fentanyl inside. The vehicle was registered to the Reflections Group home. Kristen Draper, 37, of Alpharetta, Georgia, was arraigned before U.S. Magistrate Judge Catherine M. Salinas on the charges of conspiracy to launder monetary instruments, and Antoine Brown, 40, of Alpharetta, Georgia, was previously indicted on April 22nd, 2025 on charges of possession with intent to distribute fentanyl. He will be arraigned as well on a superseding indictment charging both of them with drug and money laundering violations. At a later date, Brown has been in custody since his arrest, And, a grand jury returned the superseding indictment against Brown and Draper on May 12th, 2026. That's why we're talking about it now. Members of the public are reminded that superseding indictments only contain charges. The defendants are presumed innocent and the charges, and it will be the government's burden to, prove the guilt beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. And we will be keeping up with this case as it goes on. As always, guys, I'm so thankful if you're watching this video for you being here. I'm so, thankful to be above ground, sitting in a home, working a job, and just, having a great, beautiful life, and I want to tell you, talking to you, if you're sitting in a gutter somewhere in a ditch, this can be you too. All it takes is the simple stuff, and the rest will fall in line. And when your heart's in the right place, the good shit just keeps happening one after another. As always, it's one love. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.